Hello, everyone. I'm Mel Hightower. I head up the Multicultural Client segment here at UBS. And it is my pleasure to bring with you today and to welcome to the stage two women of crystal clear purpose whose organizations you just heard about. So I have with me Asha Curran, who is the co-founder and CEO of GivingTuesday, and Alison Moore, who is the CEO of Comic Relief US, the incredible nonprofit behind Red Nose Day. Love them.
I have a prop, I know. I have a prop.
I want one of those to take with me.
I have one for you. Mm-hmm.
Asha, let's start with you.
All right.
Share with us, what inspired you to create this wonderful movement that allows people to really focus on giving back?
I mean, I wish I could have, I wish I could say that I had foreseen everything that it has now become. We're 10 years in. But at the time, I worked at the 92nd Street Y, which is a cultural center, community center, and was really just playing with different social impact ideas that utilized social media in a way that was positive, in a way that encouraged people to do good. And GivingTuesday was one of those ideas. It started as a hashtag, and it sort of grew from there in ways that I could never have expected at the time.
Well, it's incredible to see media really drive innovation in that way. And so what was originally intended as sort of a counterpoint to Cyber Monday, Black Friday, two holidays that are really focused on consumerism, what was started as a counterpoint has now moved beyond that.
I mean, and I think that the environment has moved beyond that in really unfortunate ways, right? So back in the beginning of GivingTuesday, when people would say, "Why is there a pound sign in front of the name of GivingTuesday?" That's how new the hashtag was. Social media was just kind of silly, right? Like people were, sharing cat videos and sharing what they ate for lunch, and now it's a threat to our democracy, and it's a toxicity and division and hatred, and so it's a very, very different and very scary environment that we're operating in. And I think that everybody who's involved in GivingTuesday, we have a network of leaders around the world, 81 countries, 300 local communities here in the United States. And I think, and a lot of those leaders are women, I think they see the stakes as being much, much higher now, that if we don't fundamentally recreate a world that is based on value, and particularly on the value of generosity, that we're all really in a lot of trouble. So what started as, like a day to give back after Black Friday and Cyber Monday, feels a lot more urgent at this point.
Absolutely, and I think it goes to show, and Alison, I'd love to sort of hear from you, and that it goes to show sort of the power of media and how difficult it is for giving appeals to gain traction, right? It requires creativity, it requires sort of hitting that right moment. I think about the Ice Bucket Challenge for ALS, right? So how did Red Nose Day come to be, and why do you think it's sort of captured our imaginations?
Yeah, so, Red Nose Day is the campaign that we run at Comic Relief, and it's our largest campaign, and our focus is children, and alleviating poverty for children in the US and across the globe. And that kind of idea centered around children was really sparked by, a trip that our founder, Richard Curtis, screenwriter, director, producer of Notting Hill, Four Weddings and a Funeral. I mean, he is a national treasure in the UK, an incredible comedic and just sort of sentimentality writer, and just an incredible creative. Took a trip to Africa with a band of other creative types, and it changed his life. It changed his perspective. And he came back to the UK and he was like, what can I do to sort of create noise and to make people understand that something is happening outside and bigger than what they are doing today? And this was the idea. It's an absurd red nose in some ways, this sort of device that he kind of built around this campaign. It started out almost as like I would say a punk flippant attitude to putting a nose on a double-decker bus and on cars and people running through the streets and noses around on children on a certain day of the year. And it grew in the UK to be an organization that was able to raise $1.5 billion to help children and their families across the world. We launched it in the US in 2015 we kind of took that same spirit and attitude, but in the media business and in the media kind of environment in the US is very different. And therefore, the kind of being able to reach a consumer, when we call them consumer donors, because that's how we activate, is very different and fractured. And to Asha's point, I mean, imagine all the platforms, the places that you engage today, and just how many things you have coming through your head. There is one thing that can break through that pretty quickly. And so the idea and the construct of this creative, crazy little nose that has a message to it about helping children and lifting children out of poverty and thinking about one single thing that this nose represents and then creating scale for that. And so if that scale happens at 9,500 Walgreens, which it does across the US, at the largest broadcast network in the US, which is NBC, and we create a content and a show and a bunch of slapstick kind of stuff to make it happen, and then across multiple different platforms and ways to engage and create moments of storytelling. Because that's the other thing. You can have the nose, but you've got to tell the story too. And so it's not just enough to have celebrities, influencers, and all that kind of stuff talking about, I mean, I'll take it, and wearing their, the nose on their face and taking selfies, that works. But you also have to be able to tell the story of the impact and your work. And the work that we are doing to keep children, alleviating poverty for children around safe, healthy, educated, and empowered sort of pillars, those are the kinds of stories. And we kind of have to balance what is the creative energy and absurdity of a nose with what are really deep stories that are happening to children every day. And finding that sort of through line and that balance between the two is, part of our work, but part of the challenge, and in some ways really creates the magic of what the campaign can be and what our message can be.
Right, it brings new meaning to the phrase, the nose knows.
Yes, it's true.
But just like Giving Tuesday, Red Nose Day is more than just a day, right? You've grown not only in scale, but also in the time period that your appeal is moving for.
Yeah. So we center around a main campaign, and that was always historically 2 months. In April and May, we kick off in Walgreens, and then we culminate on May 26th. Next Thursday is the official Red Nose Day, with a show on NBC, a takeover of a lot of NBC shows, and then we have a whole ton of digital activity that goes on at the same time. Over the last couple of years, we've really expanded that to be 365 days a year, because you can go and donate to rednoseday.org Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, August, September, October, November, all days during the year. And like when Asha's Giving Tuesday comes around, this becomes a kind of galvanizing moment for us to even activate even more. It's like fuel to our fire. And so just because the main campaign is April and May, and that's the lion's share of where our dollars are raised, we are active and happening from June to December, and then we do it all again the following year. And I think, because the work doesn't stop, the need doesn't stop. When I sit with the grantees that we support, the way it works, we fundraise in this public sphere around, whether it's digital, it's retail, it's direct to consumer, all of the things that we do in a very non-traditional way, utilizing creativity. All of those dollars that we raise, or a lion's share of that dollars that we raise, go to the 20 to 25 organizations that we support. And so those are the places that, their work doesn't end at the end of May. Their work continues every month, every day of the year. And so why aren't we leveraging Red Nose Day and the power of our ability to tell those stories and to connect people and to engage and do so with joy and levity? Like, let's do that for the remainder of the year.
Sure, and speaking of causes, I read that one of the causes you recently supported was helping children who are fleeing the war in Ukraine. So
Yes.
It's incredible work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think part of our remit is to, of course, fundraise and think about the programs along those 4 pillars with a more a sort of long-term view, a short, mid, and long-term view. So we're looking at not only the root causes, but also the consequences of what's driving poverty for children and their families. But at the same time, things are happening in the world that are crisis-oriented and then require help. And so part of our balance is allocating funding to the grantees that are for our more kind of programmatic issues that sort of do the work on a regular and recurring basis for a more midterm piece, but then we have to respond. And we have a couple of organizations like Save the Children who are actively on the ground in the Ukraine, and we are putting those kinds of dollars behind them to kind of help them out with really child safety. These are the issues, and ensuring that just the basic needs are met for a lot of the children there in Ukraine. But I think it's a moment to also recognize that while what's happening in Ukraine is devastating, there have been children who have been horribly affected in wars across the globe for many, many years. And this is a terrible thing that's happening right now, but it has been continuing. And so while we are supporting organizations on the ground in the Ukraine, we support a lot of organizations who are working in war-torn countries and frankly, where children are just getting lost through the cracks.
Right, and that scale is critical. So Asha, speaking of scale, there are over 200 Giving Tuesday communities in the US, many of which are led by women. Can you share with us a few stories about those communities?
Yeah, so it's actually over 300
Oh.
at this point, communities in the US. Yeah, so they are everything from a tiny town in Alaska to the entire state of Illinois, to community by a slightly different definition, which is like based in cause or culture or identity. Those are all the kinds that make up our 300 community campaigns. And to some points that Elizabeth made during her opening segment, women in particular really lead through community. And so the women who are leading those community campaigns are really engaging in a collective effort to draw attention and help and healing and connective tissue and civic participation in the places that they live. So in Bethel, Alaska, which is one of our actual campaigns, a young woman, not even the most senior person at her local community foundation, runs Giving Tuesday Bethel. And this is a picture from Bethel, Alaska. She gathers like an army of volunteers to stand out in, no joke, like -20, -30-degree temperatures and collect donations from passersby for the 10 local nonprofits that exist in that small town. And so it's everything from that kind of story to a woman in Jackson, Tennessee, who first used her involvement with Giving Tuesday to set up little free libraries around her community, and then in the beginning of the pandemic, switched all of those little free libraries to little free pantries. This is a woman who is just a citizen of her small town, right? Just does local charity work. She now has an army of like 2,000 people who keep these little free pantries fully stocked at all times, and she deploys this army of volunteers, and she's been named like a Woman of the Year by her mayor. So there's a really interesting leadership journey that when women start really caring for their communities and exercising their agency in that way, that they really do actually gain in power and confidence and leadership skills. And it's really lovely to see that happening through generosity.
And it's not just happening through the leadership aspect, right? So 61% of Giving Tuesday donors are women. So is it that same sense of agency and purpose and community that's driving that? What's driving that?
Very much, and I think in particular it is the collective giving aspect, right? So there's very much a sense, we know this from our own data and our own surveys, that when people participate in Giving Tuesday, one of the things that they find most rewarding is that they feel they're part of something bigger than themselves, right? And that's something we all want to feel. We all want to feel that we're a fractal in a larger effort. And so I think that collective aspect is a really important part of it. It's really interesting that early in the pandemic, women were disproportionately affected economically. We know that. And that also affected donation levels. So that first year when giving actually spiked, women's giving actually went slightly down. Now that did rebound. And another thing Elizabeth talked about was mutual aid. Women are disproportionately involved in mutual aid as well. So there's data from the global development community mostly on how when women make money, they're more likely to funnel some of that money back into their local communities. Certainly to also grow their own assets, which is important, but certainly not exclusively, right? They're going to use that to uplift people around them, or they're more likely to at least. And we've seen that very much during the pandemic. Just people really gathering together to lead local efforts to make sure that people are fed, that people have shelter, right? That people who are suffering from loneliness and isolation are approached and helped. We've seen all those kinds of efforts, and certainly very much by women during these past couple of years.
Yeah. And so, Alison, what have you seen? Elizabeth mentioned that women not only are giving more, but they're spreading their donations more broadly to impact more organizations. So what have you seen about the reasons why and how women are giving?
With Red Nose Day, it's interesting. One of the things she mentioned was the sort of contextual nature that women require with giving, understanding where the money is going, how is this happening? It's not just a matter of I have the means and I want to make the transaction. I want to understand, where those dollars are going and what it's happening, and actually where can I get involved. And I think Red Nose Day's power sits with women, particularly in two ways. The first one is it is a call to action, that way you can get involved. Of course, you can buy this in stores, you can do that kind of thing, but we do kinds of social media and community activations and peer-to-peer pieces, and people raise money for Red Nose Day, and they kind of galvanize their family and their community and together. And again, because the construct is so fun, it feels very accessible, easy, and very simple. We have Red Nose Day activations in school, so there are a lot of sort of engaging things that kids do with their parents, and I think mothers in many ways are a big center force of that. And we just did a partner box with an organization called Altruist, which has this really incredible box that's branded Red Nose Day, and it gets in the homes of children and their families, and they put together a kit for a back-to-school kit and a starting kit for young kids to go back to school that are not having those kind of supplies. So that sort of idea of thinking about children and children for children, when you think about all the things that children who are living in poverty are suffering against, I think that there's a different connection that women have, understanding as motherhood as what it must be to be a mother to support a child, what it must be to be a family caught in intergenerational poverty, in which you have generations after generations and cycles of poverty that are hard to be broken around all of these systemic issues that are continuing to keep people in those cycles. And I think that there is a level of empathy and connection that is different for women. And we hear that when we interview our donors who are women. We understand that they are looking for programs that can really help support the whole child. And I think that's the power of Red Nose Day, in that it's not one thing, it's multiple different things that help build a healthy, stable environment for a child to grow and to thrive.
Right, and what we're really talking about, it sounds like, is connected giving, that women really are looking for community, context, and the caring that comes from personal involvement.
That's right.
Asha, question for you. You mentioned earlier that while there was a spike in pandemic giving, women's giving declined. What did you experience at Giving Tuesday? Were your donations up, and if so, did the mix of your donors change?
So donations on Giving Tuesday rose over 20% from 2019 to 2020. It was extraordinary, almost $2.5 billion given in 24 hours. And that's not from high net worth givers, it's from what they call everyday givers, just $100, $50 gifts. Really an extraordinary amount of money. Giving on Giving Tuesday far outpaced giving as a whole that year, and it far outpaced consumer growth, and on Black Friday and Cyber Monday that year, consumer spending was down. So that really says something about the way that people were choosing to deploy their assets, right? Because that's what philanthropy is. It's simply the deployment of our assets to create the communities that we want to live in and the world that we want to live in. And so I think that people were prioritizing giving over buying at that point, which was really kind of inspiring to see. And one thing I'll add is that the subject of Gen Z came up earlier, and it's true that they're certainly nowhere near the height of their earning power, and so we don't know exactly what their kind of philanthropic profiles are going to look like, but we have many, many Gen Zers involved in Giving Tuesday. We call them Giving Tuesday Spark, and they range from 10 years old to 21 years old. And I can certainly say that they approach social change in a very different way. They're much more interested in systemic change. They want to know why they have to solve these problems, and they want to solve the problems rather than just alleviate them. They're very much of a sort of solidarity, not charity approach to generosity, and I think that's going to create huge changes in the world of philanthropy as they grow up.
Absolutely. And Alison, I'm curious for Red Nose Day. Were your giving levels similarly impacted? Were they up?
The giving levels were able to be maintained year over year. The thing that happened for us is the entire kind of infrastructure of how we put things together for Red Nose Day fell apart a month before it happened. So while COVID hit in March of 2020, our campaign is April and May. A couple of things that really kind of ran through the organization, but it ended up to be an opportunity to grow, to do more. So first and foremost, nobody was in stores. the Red Nose was not being sold, the retail traffic was down. We had to kind of roll up our sleeves with Walgreens and come up with a digital Red Nose, and then kind of hit the pavement and hit every digital platform to kind of offer the ability to get a digital nose with transaction and sort of spread that word and use that in a whole nother way, and kind of set that up very quickly. At the same time, we were used to putting on a show with NBC with a studio and a production, 2 days, talent comes in, the whole thing. No. So we did, I'm sure you all saw this, a lot of iPhone kinds of contributions from a lot of talent and celebrities, and just said, do something funny. Bring some joy to the conversation right now on behalf of Red Nose Day. And we had so many great clips that came in, and we stitched them together in this sort of storytelling way. We had Ricky Gervais in a bathtub. I don't recommend that, but anyway, it worked. It was good. It was good. It all worked. And then we're able to kind of tell our story in between and really kind of hone in the conversation around, of course, the level of need that had happened before COVID hit, but imagine what's happening to children living in poverty now, who have been set back years already in the first few months. Right. So that happened on the fundraising side, and that was, a lot of sort of change that we had to undergo very quickly. And then on our grants side, my grantee team, my grants team works very closely with our grantees. It's a partnership approach, and we're very tied into the kind of programmatic work that we're doing, because that's what we're funding and understanding where we're moving the needle together. All of a sudden, their lives changed. So like Kevin Ryan, who is at Covenant House, they create first and foremost housing for young people, but they also have a host of services that go along with that, and to really be able to keep young people who are not in housing situations that are sustainable, come and find a home and grow and thrive from there. All of a sudden, he's setting up floors with a medical wing, with an isolation wing, PPE, all the things that comes with, that's a capital intensive issue. And so now, all of a sudden, we had to find rapid response dollars to kind of get to help our organizations be able to act in the time of need when that was happening.
And Alison, that's a great point on how the pandemic is not just affecting giving organizations, but it's affecting donees as well, and grantees as well.
Yes.
Asha, I'd love to circle back on this idea of movement. You've said that it's not a movement until it moves without you. And by all accounts, GivingTuesday is just that. So we've talked about the impact of the pandemic. Let's look ahead. What does the next 5 years hold for GivingTuesday? Where do you see the organization going?
I think we're going to really double down on continuing to grow globally, and particularly to place a lot of attention and resource in those places in our family and our GivingTuesday community that are facing crises of various kinds. 52% of our countries are Global South. Many of our closest countries and most active, Ukraine, Lebanon, Venezuela, Colombia, the list goes on. South Sudan is one of our newest countries. These countries are using GivingTuesday to fundamentally strengthen and grow healthy, thriving societies at all levels. So we've just opened full-time offices in East Africa and India. I think there's just a lot of really exciting work ahead, and it's really a privilege to be able to have a day job where you focus on people who are focusing on the positive and approaching really difficult situations with hope and optimism.
I love that. It's sort of purpose-driven work. And Alison, that's the case for you. I think it's so rare to be able to live your purpose in the work that you do all the time. And our research shows that really the pandemic has been a time of reflection and reprioritization for so many of us. 3 in 4 of the women we surveyed mentioned that they exited the pandemic feeling more intentional, more inspired to give and to do more. Share with us a little bit on the personal side for you. How do you think about your purpose, both in your work and more broadly?
The fact that I am in this job is every day a reminder of how one can bring whatever talents you may or may not have to drive purpose in the world. I feel grateful and lucky to be running an organization that every day we wake up and think about ways that we are going to either, drive our growth and fundraising, to be able to drive more impact. I am a media and entertainment executive for 25 some odd years, and I came to this organization bringing all the things that I had done in that sphere. And I'm amazed what we can do when we put together the ideas of innovation and technology and storytelling and digital and creativity, frankly, and bring that to drive even more scale, because I think we can make even more impact. And God knows there's enough things to be working on today. And that just makes me feel satisfied every time I sit and think about what we can do together.
That's wonderful. Alison, Asha, thank you so much for joining us and
Thank
sharing
you.
so much about your journeys and your wonderful organizations with us. Thanks very much.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.